Hey, well met, travelers. Thanks for stopping by my channel. I really appreciate it. Today, we're going to be looking at the potential ramifications of Trump's election victory on the future of Hollywood movies. This seems to be a big sticking point for a lot of Trump supporters, at least in the spaces that I cover here on YouTube. The PAC-led channels, I like to call them, are all pretty enamored of Donald Trump and are salivating over the prospect that wokeness is about to die or something. So I want to take a look at an interesting article I found on The Wrap, which I believe is a British publication, though I could be wrong. And this is sort of a thing like the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, that sort of thing. And the title of the article is "Hollywood Braces for a Woke Backlash in the Wake of Trump's Election," and tells us while a shift was already underway, especially among tentpole films, some see the potential for self-censorship. So this is kind of predicting that we're going to be seeing the imposition of something like the Hays Code. If you don't know what that is, a brief description would be that during the Cold War, Hollywood had a code that was self-imposed, sort of. They imposed it on themselves in order to avoid government imposition of potentially stricter codes. But it was like a code about morality, about what kinds of things and what sorts of images could be shown on screen, and what sorts of political opinions can be expressed, and that sort of thing. So we don't have a Hays Code right now. There's always some level of self-censorship involved in corporate media. They are, after all, profit-driven, and so the bias will be towards doing only things that will potentially increase the profit of the company. If that means being diverse in your casting, then that's what they're going to do. If the economic trends go in the opposite direction, they will follow the money. So this article might be predicting that something like that's going to be happen. So let's see what Alexei Barrionuevo and Adam Chitwood have to say about this. So it tells us Hollywood, overwhelmingly liberal, is weighing the potential backlash to its business of a second Donald Trump presidency and a right-leaning electorate. Now let's stop and ponder this phrase, a right-leaning electorate here. It is clear that Donald Trump did win this election. That's indisputable in my opinion. I'm not happy about that result, but he did win, at least according to the rules that we operate our elections under in the United States. He won the Electoral College, and that's all you really need. The popular vote is irrelevant. And at the time of this recording, it looks like Donald Trump once again did not win the popular vote. The last I checked, it was a very slim margin, but the number of people who voted for Kamala Harris or other non-Trump candidates just barely outnumbers the number of people who voted for Trump. And so to describe the American electorate as right-leaning, I think is a bit of a mistake. We don't fully understand what happened in this election quite yet. We won't really have a complete picture of the electoral trends for several months now, so anyone claiming to have the narrative that explains everything should probably be ignored. Like, for instance, one thing we saw a lot of what's called ticket splitting, which is where the voters vote for Donald Trump at the top of the ticket for president, and then at all of the other offices underneath him, they vote for the Democrats. This happened a lot in Nevada. It happened pretty famously in AOC's district in New York City, where she outperformed Kamala Harris among her own voters in that district, and yet the majority of the voters in her district voted Donald Trump for president. In other words, they voted for Trump and AOC on the same ballot. So it's going to be a while before we figure out what the actual trends are here. But I think it is safe to say that there will be a lot of political pressure coming from conservatives in American pop culture because of the Trump victory. They're going to spend a few months acting like they have some overwhelming mandate, and they will inevitably overreach. And maybe Hollywood will be one of the places they overreach. But the article continues. After many years of embracing left-wing values, again, I would dispute this, but I'm not going to split hairs here, diversity and inclusion in Marvel and Star Wars storylines, empowering women in superhero movies and animated kids fare, Hollywood may find itself tipping rightward as the winds of change blow through the country. Now, in one sense, Hollywood has always been right-leaning. The United States, on a global political spectrum, has been pretty right-wing for like 80 years, since the end of World War II. The Democrats are a right-wing party when measured on a global political scale. You know, in a country like, say, Mexico or one of the European democracies, Joe Biden and AOC would be members of a different political party. Joe Biden would be a member of the Conservative Party, and AOC would be a member of a centrist party. But in the United States, AOC is considered a far left radical, so is Bernie Sanders. And Hollywood has always had a very close relationship as well with the military-industrial complex. A lot of the movies we make that feature military stories incorporate equipment and training and personnel from the actual military, and that relationship does come with strings attached. So it is very easy to overstate the left-wing values of Hollywood. I don't think diversity and inclusion and the empowering of women is left-wing. I see that as a human rights issue, not a left or right-wing issue. But once again, we're talking about the Wrap's article here and their projections for how a conservative political victory in the US might affect filmmaking going forward. So it continues. It's a shift away from wokeness that was already underway, but some in the industry are clearly concerned. Let's keep this in mind. The shift away from so-called wokeness was already underway. That's probably going to be an important point to remember as we go forward. It's not because of Donald Trump. We know that Hollywood loves to follow and not lead, Evan Shapiro, a film and television producer, told The Wrap. It's very likely you'll see more of Jake Paul, more of Joe Rogan, more of Zachary Levi, more of Roseanne Barr. No, not likely. More of the right-leaning, conservative-leaning creator economy will get more airtime because clearly that S works. Now, we might be seeing more of Jake Paul. Maybe. He is young, so he's got a lot of career ahead of him. We might see him in some movies and stuff. More of Joe Rogan in Hollywood? No, we won't see that. More of Zachary Levi in Hollywood? No. At least not anytime soon. That man has burned way too many bridges. Same with Roseanne Barr. She is pretty toxic to Hollywood. There are conservatives working in Hollywood. I know some of them personally. A lot of them work for CBS. You know, CBS has a very tight relationship with the military. They've got the NCIS franchise and stuff going on over there. Belisarius Productions has been pro-Republican for as long as I've lived in Los Angeles, and that's been like 20 plus years. They always have the Republicans, whoever the Republican president is at the time, presidential candidate, excuse me. Whoever the Republican presidential candidate is at the time, Belisarius Productions hangs their campaign materials in the window. But there are lines even they will not cross. Conservatives who work in Hollywood are still people, and they still have empathy for others. They still are capable of seeing other people's point of view. They still care about making a good story first and foremost. So people like Roseanne Barr and Zachary Levi have crossed that line, in my opinion. They're never going to work in mainstream Hollywood again. Jake Paul might, if he plays his cards right. I doubt he has any real talent, but we'll see. Anyway, the article continues. On Friday, producer and former talent manager Cassian Elways noted on X that the experience of putting together a new movie, quote, has been painful because of the current environment in Hollywood where fear is rampant. But I'm a filmmaker. I need to lead by example. The audience is out there. We just need to figure out a way to reach them. I'm hoping there are distribution innovators dreaming of new paths. Okay, let's continue. In the days after the election, The Wrap spoke to talent managers, producers, directors, and consultants to get their take on how a rightward lean could impact Hollywood output. Their opinions varied, with some rejecting the notion that entertainment will be a target, while others insisted that, target or not, Hollywood will find a way to produce and distribute diverse stories. All right, let's stop there. Diverse stories doesn't just mean like racially diverse and sexuality diverse and gender diverse. It also means intellectually diverse. And one of the things that Hollywood has been talking about quietly for a few years now is what they see as the untapped market of conservative leaning or traditional values media or faith-based media. The success of TV shows like The Chosen has kind of taken them by surprise and gotten them to pay attention to other potential revenue streams aside from the ones they rely on. And again, remember, this is driven by money, not by ideology. So the trend away from so-called wokeness was already underway in Hollywood. They've been trying to expand their customer base, and one of the consequences of that is that they think if they can make media that appeals to people who think Hollywood is run by blood-sucking child molesters, then they'll make more money. I have my doubts about that, but that's the thinking going forward. So let's continue with the article here. Quote, "Hollywood won't be a target," said one top talent agent. "To think they'll be specifically targeted is hubris personified. If they make good films and TV shows like Top Gun, Twisters, It Ends With Us, and Yellowstone that appeal to mass audiences rather than to niche New York City, LA audiences, they'll be fine." Again, agreed, 100%. Yellowstone is another great conservative coded show. I don't think it actually is conservative necessarily, but a lot of conservatives like it, and it's a really good show. And it's spawned like a whole franchise. There's spin-offs of that show out the yazoo. Top Gun, of course, is a great movie. Both Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick were great movies, and they're very, very conservative coded. Nonetheless, they're great entertainment. So as long as Hollywood keeps doing that, they'll be fine, this person says. However, Emmy-winning producer Rob Eric noted his company, Scout Productions, debuted some of its biggest hits during the first Trump presidency, including Queer Eye, now the longest-running show on Netflix. Quote, "Whenever you try to stifle the voice of a very loud and very prevalent community, it just gets louder and harder to stifle," Eric said of rebooting the reality makeover series in 2018. "It's like a dam, right? You can only hold that water back so long." Trump and Republicans like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis have repeatedly pushed back on woke culture as a core part of their political strategy. The president-elect has stated that he will push to defund National Public Radio and PBS and potentially restrict the awarding and renewal of FCC licenses. That has some Hollywood veterans fearing an industry that becomes compelled to engage in self-censorship, okay? That is an important point right there. Defunding National Public Radio and PBS and threatening to restrict the awarding of FCC licenses, that is censorship, folks. That is what the First Amendment was set up to protect us from. So if you're somebody in the PAC-led channel community who's been complaining about censorship from woke Hollywood and demanding that we have intellectual diversity in our media, and you are in favor of defunding National Public Radio and PBS and threatening the awarding and renewal of FCC licenses, you are not in favor of free speech. You're in favor of censorship. The article continues, quote, "These studios should not be surprised when they get a knock on the door and they find out that there's going to be a new code for movies and television shows that are going to be broadcast nationally," Shapiro said, referring to Hollywood's self-imposed Hays Code from 1934 to 1968, which severely restricted profanity, suggestive nudity, suggestive drug use, and ridicule of the clergy. Again, the Hays Code was self-imposed because there was a threat from outside the industry by the government to impose even stricter codes on them. So to take the teeth out of that threat, Hollywood imposed censorship on itself. Now we get to the point of this article. Hollywood was already becoming less woke. Diversity programming in Hollywood kicked off largely during the #MeToo movement, which took off in 2017 with the revelations of sexual misconduct involving former mogul Harvey Weinstein. I'm not sure I'd agree that's when it started. I've talked before at some video on this channel about the influence that the Fast and the Furious franchise had on movie making and movie marketing starting around 2016 or so. Fast and the Furious is one of the most financially successful movie franchises in history. And in 2016, I think it was in the top 5 most profitable film franchises ever. And what stood Fast and Furious apart from the rest of the franchises in that top 5 at the time was that they were incredibly racially diverse, at least relative to the rest of American cinema. And trying to understand this phenomenon, a lot of studios conducted studies. They commissioned studies by social scientists and economists and stuff. And they found that on a global market, films that had a cast of 50% or more non-white characters were just as profitable as films that had majority white casts. So they started making more movies that looked like that in the hopes of appealing to a broader global audience. So it wasn't, and I'm sure the Me Too movement did play a role here because it made Hollywood, start giving women better roles and at least nominally protecting their rights in the industry. But that wasn't the start of the so-called woke shift. But anyway, the article continues. By 2022, 31 of the top films featured an individual from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group in a lead or co-lead role, according to the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. That was more than double the 13 in 2007 films, but fell short of the 16-year high of 37 films in 2021. And only 15% of 2022's top 100 films featured a cast that was, quote, gender balanced. That is, featured girls and women in 45 to 55% of speaking roles. That was unchanged from 2007. There was only one gender non-binary character across the top 100 films of 2022, Annenberg found. So, did you notice that? There was no change in the representation of women from 2007 to 2022. That stayed the same. In the wake of Black Lives Matter, major corporations, including tech titans Amazon, Google, Netflix, and Apple, became more publicly willing to wade into heated local and national debates over increased diversity, equity, and inclusion. Amid a GOP backlash against woke corporations, they have since backed off. In the same way, the commitment for BLM waned after 2020, a study by Loyola Marymount University found. Right? This should not surprise us. As I pointed out earlier, American society, or at least American industry, defaults to conservatism. And by conservatism, I mean defense of the status quo, not necessarily an ideological conservatism. So if there's a flare-up of awareness about Black Lives Matter, for instance, for a time, corporations will pander to that in order to make money, but then when the enthusiasm for it dies down, they will revert back to what they were doing before. Hollywood is no different in this regard. It's just capitalism all the way down, baby. But the article says, at the same time, Hollywood's DEI executives have been exiting the major studios over the last year in droves. So it's not surprising that over the past year, Hollywood has been shifting to more conservative output, or at least more heteronormative one. That's an odd choice. Okay. Marvel, the maker of the biggest and most consistent franchise hits, made a push to create more diverse lineups after the runaway success of Black Panther in 2018 and the Brie Larson-led Captain Marvel in 2019. Both films grossed over $1 billion at the box office. In their wake, the studio released Shang-Chi, featuring a nearly all-Asian cast, the diverse ensemble film Eternals from filmmaker Chloe Zhao, and female team-up The Marvels. That was on top of a TV output that included Ms. Marvel, a TV show about a teenage Muslim superhero, and the Tatiana Maslany-led She-Hulk. But upcoming projects from Marvel are less diverse. Next year's Fantastic Four has only one person of color in its main cast, and the titular Thunderbolts team is majority white, with 4 out of the 6. After Jonathan Majors was jettisoned as the main villain for the upcoming Avengers movies over his domestic assault charges, Marvel tapped Robert Downey Jr. as his replacement, bringing the Iron Man actor back as Dr. Doom. And it's not just Marvel. Most of the main characters in Warner Bros. And DC's Superman reboot are white, a contrast from Zack Snyder's diverse Justice League lineup that included Jason Momoa and Ray Fisher. After the previous regime cast Sasha Calle as the first Latina Supergirl in 2024's The Flash, she was great, by the way, new DC heads James Gunn and Peter Safran cast Millie Alcock as the character for their rebooted solo Supergirl film. And Batgirl, a $90 million film that starred Dominican actress Leslie Grace, was shelved entirely by Warner Brothers. Now, I want to say Sasha Calle and Michael Keaton are the only things that made the Flash movie watchable. She was great as Supergirl, and I would love to see her again in some other superhero role. They won't give her Supergirl, but I think she's got a great career ahead of her with like superhero material and action material. Anyway, then there's Star Wars. Racist backlash to Moses Ingram's character in Obi-Wan became a powder keg for online criticism and prompted Lucasfilm to speak out directly against the attacks. The racist vitriol returned when The Acolyte, which focuses on the relationship between 2 black female leads and their non-white mentors, premiered this year. Disney did not renew the show for a second season. It was the first Star Wars show to be canceled under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership at Lucasfilm. Okay, this is a little bit misleading right here. Go back and look at the media that was written and the articles that were written about The Acolyte before it aired, and you will see that it was never intended to be more than a 1-season show. It was not canceled. because there were never plans to make more than one season. Leslie Headland said in interviews that she set up an ending for the show that would make a second season possible if they could convince Disney to make one, but Disney never had plans to do more than one season. So that bit is a little bit misleading. Anyway, I think we're getting the point here. So they talk about Prime Video's Lord of the Rings, reduced screen time for Ismael Cruz Cordova's character, the Black Elf, and killed off his girlfriend character. That'll probably change next season. I think they'll give him more screen time. They just weren't quite sure what to do with him in season 2, I think. But let's see. Will the studios exit the culture wars? Okay. That shift underway could soften the blow of Trump's second go-around as president, which will be accompanied by Republican-controlled Senate, House, and an already conservative-leaning and activist Supreme Court. We're still open on the House. The House might go Democrat barely, but we'll see. Anyway, the woke backlash, if any, would be minimal, a longtime entertainment industry consultant said. This is a different time and a different country, and studios learned a harsh lesson by jumping headfirst into the culture wars. No studio will make that mistake again. Shapiro wondered if Roseanne creator Barr would have been fired from her show in 2018 in the current climate. Yes, she would have. She wasn't fired because of her politics. I'll just put it that way. Quote, everyone said Zachary Levi was committing career suicide when he supported Trump. I don't think that's as true a statement as it was 3 months ago, he observed. We'll see. Zachary Levi is not really well liked in the industry either, from what I understand. You got to understand that a lot of these celebrities who are fired from properties are fired for reasons that have nothing to do with politics. It's usually because they're just an asshole and they're impossible to work with, or they are like harassing or abusing their castmates or crewmates or something. It's always something like that. And then they will publicly claim that it was because they were doing something political or going against the woke agenda. But when you dig into the details, you find that's not really what happened at all. And for Roseanne Barr and Zachary Levi, both, that was the case. There's a lot more to those two than they are telling you. Anyway, will there be any blowback or retribution for the cavalcade of entertainment superstars, including Taylor Swift, Beyonce, and Bruce Springsteen, that supported Kamala Harris? Influencing Hollywood's content may be harder today than it would seem. Industry leader Netflix produces international programs in many different languages, and as a result is less vulnerable to pressure. This is a global network, so you have to appease a huge number of people, and that includes people that do not want to suppress storytelling because it doesn't coincide with the thought ethics of a certain political group, Eric said. Meanwhile, Alphabet-owned YouTube has exploded over the past 5 years, driven by user-generated content. The platform is so ubiquitous that even Russia allowed it to remain live when other Western content providers and streaming services were ordered out by Vladimir Putin's government. Overall, in American culture and society, yes, of course, there was a backlash to woke culture. Again, I dispute that, but okay. It's the entire reason for the explosion in stand-up comedy. In stand-up comedy, they can't be censored like they would be in film and TV. Okay. Anti-woke stand-up comics are not funny. They're just not. They have one joke about trans people, and that's it. They have failed the first understanding or the first rule of stand-up. You're supposed to be funny, not controversial. You're not supposed to make people mad. You're supposed to make them laugh. If you make them mad while making them laugh, that's okay. But you're supposed to be funny first, and these guys are not funny. And that's why they have to like start their own stupid podcasts and stuff to get an audience. Anyway, he added that Donald Trump was so right-wing crazy during his first term that the left and Democrats moved to the extreme left in culture and politics. Who is saying this? I'm going to look up this guy's name. That's ridiculous. It was like any other pendulum. Eventually it will settle in the middle somewhere. 80% of the American people reside. Okay. The idea that the left and Democrats move to the extreme left in culture and politics is ridiculous. I don't know what presidential election they were watching, but Kamala Harris ran at best as a centrist. She talked about having the most lethal fighting force in the world and palled around with Liz Cheney, an actual warmonger who voted with Donald Trump about 95% of the time when she was in Congress. Kamala Harris supported the right-wing border bill that Joe Biden that included no provisions for a pathway to citizenship. So the idea that the Democrats went too far to the left is ridiculous. This person doesn't understand politics very well. Be that as it may, the overall point of this article is that the Wrap thinks that we're going to be seeing more conservative content out of Hollywood as a result of the Donald Trump election. That's probably true, but I think it's not true in the way that the Wrap thinks it is, or at least the way that these authors think it is. Hollywood does not have an ideology that is markedly different from the rest of the United States. Like the rest of the United States, Hollywood is center-right in its politics, and its gestures towards racial and gender diversity are always carried out within a very restrictive paradigm of profit. As long as it's profitable, they're for it. If it's not profitable, they will stop it. That's true for conservative media and for liberal media. If conservative media becomes unprofitable, Hollywood will not make it. If liberal content becomes unprofitable, Hollywood will not make it. They're committed to capitalism, which is right-wing, by the way, not to diversity or wokeness or anything like that. Wokeness is not real. It's a boogeyman made up by a bunch of pack-leds who are just lying to you to get money out of you on their own YouTube channels. And I've gone on long enough, so we'll leave it at that. If you like this kind of content, be sure to give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think about all of this. And be sure to share this video, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, remember that what's best in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and engage in discourse with the women. Thanks for watching.